All right, back here with a special edition of our IndyStar Preps Weekly. Trevor Andershock, Jeff the Shark Schoenle have joined me, and we're going to break down the Indiana All-Star team for 2024. And Shark's watching the into the Purdue game, so if he I don't know, goes crazy, I guess that's good, or could be bad. Who knows?
If you hear a door slamming, it's just my head in it. That's all.
That's all. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't mind me.
Right. But yeah, we're gonna talk Indiana All-Stars, and this is a class, Trevor. I'll start with you. That it's probably not the deepest class we've had, to put it mildly. It's not the not the best class we've seen in the last 10 years, 15 years. So it makes it an interesting class to try to pick. But what your overall thoughts on this 2024 class?
Yeah, like you said, it's definitely not the deepest. Obviously, Flory Badunga moving in helps the class, but without him, it was going to struggle to get more than a handful of, solidified D1 guys going into last summer. And usually you have a couple dozen instead of a handful. So I think that kind of speaks about how deep this class is, or the lack of depth. But yeah, just going over who I thought could make this Indiana All-Star team. You really, after 10 guys, you have a big group of people who have had good seasons, but haven't really put themselves in the position whether it's a no-brainer Indiana All-Star type. So like you said, it makes it interesting because there are so many people who have an argument to be on the team, but there's so few that have really locked themselves into a spot this late in the season. It's pretty surprising.
Well, let's start. And we talked about how many locks, Shark, do you have? How many do you think are locked into a spot on this team so far that are like no-brainer picks?
To me, I have 3. I completely agree with Trevor's assessment that, most years you have 8 or 9, maybe even 10 locks, and you're just really trying to round out the roster, around sectional time. I think, there's starting spots that are wide open. I personally have 3 locks, in my opinion. I don't know how many you guys have, but like Trevor said, that's wide open for you don't want to say the bottom half of the roster because they're all talented kids, but, spots 6 through 13, there's 20 guys fighting for those 7-8 spots.
And we're going to say it's a 13-man team. For our purposes here, there are some years where it's 14 based on an injury or whatever, but we're going to keep it to a 13-man team as we look at it. Trevor, how many locks did you have on? We and I'll say ahead of time, I didn't want to really talk to you guys about this before we recorded, so we don't know what each other kind of has here going into it. It's like a card game, it's like we're playing. We don't know each other's hand going into it, so. How many do you have, Trevor?
I ended up putting 4 guys on my lock kind of tier, but I can definitely see where Shark's coming from with 3, assuming they're the 3 I'm thinking of. But I have 4. I thought if you go, shorter than that, then you're really getting nitpicky a little bit too much. So I went with 4 guys for my locks.
All right, let's start with the first one. I think we don't have to spend too much time. Flory Badunga, I'm sure. We've all 3 have him. He's a guy I think will be maybe the front runner, probably the front runner for Mr. Basketball. I don't think there's many arguments to be made here, is there?
No, he was on line 1 for me. Definitely the front runner for Mr. Basketball in my eyes.
No complaints from
Kansas,
me, Kyle.
What's that?
No complaints from me, Kyle.
Headed to Kansas, McDonald's All-American. The only one on this team who is or the only one that we'll be picking who is a McDonald's All-American. And should say, too, ahead of time, too, this class was hurt by Cannon Catchings leaving as well. So he definitely, I think, would have been in this lock category as well. But at this point, and, ineligible to make this team, clearly. So who do you have? I mentioned number 1 there. Who's number 2, Shark? Who else do you have?
I have Jack Benner from Brownstown. We talk about Indiana All-Stars, whether it's a senior year award or kind of a career award. Same thing with Mr. Basketball. And either way, I think you have to have Jack Benner. I know he's had some injuries. He's missed a couple of the big events statewide, the Sneakers for Santa, he wasn't able to play in. The Hall of Fame Classic, he wasn't able to play in. I think that kind of hurt his Mr. Basketball candidacy, to be honest, but he still put up some great numbers for a really good Brownstown Central team. So he's my line 2 behind Flory.
And I'll say he is, I got his stats today. He's 24.5 points per game right now, 6.8 rebounds. And I don't think there's probably much argument to be made against him being on the team. The only unfortunate thing I'll say, I thought he had a chance to make a real run, and he may still at Mr. Basketball, because I think this is a team that could win a state championship. But he did miss the Hall of Fame, and he missed the game against Lawrence North due to 2 different injuries, and he missed 5 games of the season so far. So hopefully he's fully healthy. He's number 27 right now on the all-time scoring list. He'll move up very quickly. He's going to jump several spots. All these names are numbers are bunched together. So he's going to make a run up to the top 20 real quick, and probably well beyond that. So Jack Benner, pretty clearly, I think, Indian All-Star, and potentially still an outside shot, I think, at Mr. Basketball. And also, too, I'll say I think he'll probably carry a lot of votes. Sometimes that matters in his part of the state. I think that's something we could see to work in his favor with the Mr. Basketball vote.
Yeah, playing in Southern Indiana, those guys like to stick together, and he'll definitely get some votes. Like you said, missing those key games, I think, really hurts him in the voting statewide. If he would have been able to put up some huge numbers, they win the Hall of Fame, maybe he gets more votes from the northern half there. But definitely deserving to have Jack Benner on the team.
Number 3, Trevor, who's your next lock on this list?
I went KJ Wyndham from Ben Davis. Obviously played a huge part in their undefeated season last year. 3-year guy for the Giants. Another great year, heading to Northwestern after his high school career. I thought he's just been really consistent for them, been a big kind of cog in the program at Ben Davis, becoming such a power over the last few years. And I think his overall body of work plus his senior year makes him a lock in my eyes.
Yeah, 15.5 points per game right now. He's kind of taken over that, which we thought he would going into this year. He's been kind of, last year I was impressed. He was kind of willing and took a role that was maybe not what he thought it was going in. He got hurt and then had to come back and was basically a 6th man and played that role really well on a state champion team. But 15.5 a game, he's leading Ben Davis in scoring. Obviously, he shoots it really well from 3. And I think he had a really good summer. Obviously, put himself in position to get that Northwestern offer. And, he's a guy who can really, I think, fits well with the other guys you've got so far with Flory and Jack Benner. A guy who just seems to, he plays well in big games too. And I think I think that team, moving forward, they're gonna be a favorite in that sectional. And it sounds weird from a defending state champ, but maybe kind of a sleeper team to make a run in the 4A tournament, coming off a good win over Attucks last week. So he was. Shark, did you also have KJ as your 3rd?
He was not my 3rd lock. I did have him probably about as close as you could get to a lock without doing it. He was, I think, 4th or 5th on my list when I was going down kids. Obviously, like you said, with the injury last year, you thought he would have played a huge role in last year's state title, but kind of had to not take a back seat, but just fill in where as needed. And he's healthy this year, and Ben Davis is still making a move in 4A, their team to look for in March, making a deep run. So definitely a deserving pick for KJ Wyndham.
Well, I'll turn it back over to you. Who was your next lock?
My lock was Keenan Gardner of Fishers. With the year that they're having, losing Jalen Harrelson, watching his game against Flory at Southport, where he just played so incredibly hard. He's been the leader for them, doing a lot of different things. He's worked on his body, seems to be more athletic, quicker this year, a better perimeter shooter than he was last year, and just really had a great year. I know Fishers lost this week to Carmel, but they're still one of the favorites in 4A, and he's a huge reason for that.
He was also one I had on my lock list. And mine was, I should say, I had 6 on my list of locks that I think, these are not locks that are like, these guys are for sure on the team. But in my mind, they will be. Garner is a guy I think's improved a lot. You kind of touched on it there with, he's only been here 2 years, but he's made the most of it. And I think, this year's team with Jalen Harrelson leaving, he's been the guy that has kind of stepped right in and been the main scorer for them. 17 points, leads them in rebounds, leads them in second actually in assists with 3.6, more than 8 rebounds a game and block shots. He's almost 2 a game. So just does a lot of things, very aggressive player. And they've been undefeated up until this past weekend when they lost to Carmel. So, they've got a couple bigger games ahead, and obviously it's going to be tough to get out of that sectional. But Trevor, I don't know what you thought about Garner and his chances, but I feel like too, I agree. I think he's going to be one of those locks for me as well.
Yeah, I had him kind of on the 1B line. I think you could pretty much combine my locks and my near locks, basically tier 1 and tier 2, but I had him in the second tier. But definitely a guy I think should make the team with his season, how much he's meant to Fishers and his production and leadership. I mean, that team's really tough, and it kind of starts with him inside doing all the dirty work. So I definitely think he should make the team.
And it'll be interesting, and we'll get to some of these other names that are in that same sectional, but that'll be, I don't think in his case it's going to necessarily come down to that, but it could for some other guys who are in that same sectional, and only, of course, one will come out of there. But very competitive sectional again in sectional 8, which will be played at Noblesville this year, so it could give the Millers a little bit of a upper hand. So who are we missing here, Trevor, or Jeff? Are those all of your locks we've mentioned?
Yeah, those are my 3 locks: Flory, Jack, and Keenan. Those who were my 3.
Tough grader by Shark, only having 3 locks.
That's a high. He's got high standards. I mean, it's just nothing else.
How's that from Fort Wayne Wood?
How's that Purdue game going, by the way?
Final just went Purdue 101, Northwestern 96.
Wow.
Chris Collins not happy with Courtney Green on his way off the floor. Dapping up Zach Edey.
I love this play-by-play.
Waving to the crowd, getting the crowd fired up.
Well, good. We can watch that later, I guess. That's all we really needed there.
Thanks for the cut-in.
Yeah. But, yeah. It is interesting, though. I was watching that game, and it's funny how time flies. But P.J. Thompson and Bryant McIntosh, both on the 2014 Indiana All-Star team. So those guys, I remember even at the time was like, man, these guys, they sound like coaches. They act like coaches, and sure enough, they are coaches. So, but yeah, they were on that same All-Star team together 10 years ago. So pretty cool. Trevor, did we get to all of your locks? So you got one more?
I actually have one more. I have Micah Davis from Franklin Community on my lock team. This overall great career, big-time scorer. It's kind of been the piece that has helped that Franklin team develop over the last couple of years. And I think he deserves to be on the Indiana All-Star team.
I also had him as a lock. I've seen him play this season now. Obviously I've seen what he's done throughout the year, even the games I haven't seen. He's just put up really good numbers, and I think he's just an overall better player than he has been, and he was pretty good anyway. But 25.8 points a game, 5.8 rebounds, 4.6 assists, and going to Eastern Kentucky, so he's already locked into his college commitment, and he's shooting at a higher percentage. I don't have that here immediately. I think he has 54% from the field too, so pretty good for a guard. The thing about him, he's lefty. He's very strong to his left hand, and he still gets there. So he knows how to maneuver his way to the basket. And I covered the game against Whiteland. Whiteland ended up beating him in a really good game, but man, he was almost impossible to stop. I think he had 35 in that game. That's kind of been his type of season so far. So I also had him, and I also had one more. I had Evan Haywood from Brebeuf as my sixth lock to be on the team. Headed to Butler, putting up good numbers this season so far. Brebeuf's a team I think that's going to have a chance to go pretty far in the tournament as well. I think that's going to be maybe a thing. It's going to be another feather in his cap. The problem they have is that Guerin Catholic's also in their sectional. They did beat Guerin the game I covered just a couple weeks ago, but a very tough opponent who made the state finals last year. But Haywood, 21.4 points a game, 6.1 rebounds. Like I said, he's committed to Butler, and I think that will help as well when you start looking at these teams. And, when you got this class that's maybe not as deep, being that Division I high major hometown kid, and not that I think he's deserved it anyway. He's 43% from three also, so shooting it at a really high percentage. But I know you guys had him somewhere on your list, but I also had him on my lock list.
Yeah, I had him in that second tier where I had Keenan Gardner, where they're pretty much locks, but I just had him as one step below my first tier. But like you said, Haywood's been great. His development over the last 2 years has been really special. He went from, a role player into a scorer, and then this year into a big-time scorer, big-time shot maker as well. So I think he's very deserving of making the all-star team, and a heck of a talent that should just continue to get better throughout his college career too. It might take him a while at Butler to adjust that level, but I think at some point he's going to be a really good college player as well.
And Kyle, I think it's really interesting. Your last two names are kind of polar opposites into how their high school careers have played out. Micah Davis, we heard his name down there at Franklin starting, early on in his freshman season, where he was an impact player on the varsity level. And then you go right into Evan Hayward, who's not come out of nowhere, but definitely been more of a late bloomer. So it's been interesting to see those two kind of polar opposites in how their high school careers played out, but yet they're getting to the same point here to be talked about as Indiana All-Stars or potential Indiana All-Stars this year.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw out another name here that I think could be, and you guys feel free to disagree or chime in, but to me, I think another name, and again, you're putting this team together, not necessarily the top 13 players, but as a team that, you're trying to, and this has always been told to me by the committee directors that I've worked with over the years, and even in Mike Broughton as well, who's done it the last, what has it been, 5 or 6 years now. He's been in charge. Is you're putting a team together to try to beat Kentucky. You're not necessarily just putting down the best 13 you think are the top 13 players. So, keep that in mind, as well as we do this. Now, I think that is part of it. If you're one of the best players, obviously you're in the mentions. You're in the mention for this team. But I'm going to throw Tyler Parrish's name out from Chesterton. I think he's a guy that I just really like his game. I think he will fit well with this team. I think he's over 1,000-point scorer now. He's played 2 years ago on a team that made the state championship game. They obviously didn't play very well in that and ran into a really good opponent. But I've seen him play a couple times this year again, and just think he's I think he's one of the top 13 players, and I also think he'll fit well in an all-star type game. He can really score. He has to do a lot for that Chesterton team, but also, I think sometimes too it works in your favor. You're from another, they're from up north, and sometimes, you get too Central Indiana heavy, or you get too heavy in one area of the state sometimes, and I think that'll help him too. But I just think the overall body of work, I like putting him on this team.
Yeah, he rounds out my 1B category of near locks. His special senior year, and overall his career has been great for Chesterton. Won a lot of games for them. Could notch another sectional title, although that will be tough this year with Valpo, Portage, and that group. But yeah, he's having a fantastic senior year, doing it all for Chesterton, inside, outside, defending, leading. He's been counted on to be a leader for this Chesterton program. So I think he's as close as you can get as to a lock in my eyes.
Yeah, he was a name I had on my list, and I think your point was well taken, Kyle. They're looking to round out a team, not just maybe the 13 most talented players. And I think he can fit in kind of a jack of all trades. He can handle the ball. He can shoot. He's a good athlete. He can guard people. And, I mean, he was the probably second best player on Chesterton's state runner-up team that was undefeated until that game against Cathedral. And he's just continued to do it at a high level his last 2 years of high school. So definitely a well-deserved nominee for Tyler Parrish here. He was high on my list as well.
I almost had him on my lock category. I think I think he's pretty close to that. I didn't quite have him right there just yet. I think it's pretty close to that. Trevor, who did you? I mean, you said he was the last one on your 1A 1B. How did you categorize that next category? What did you had you categorize the next level?
For my notes, I put them a surprise if they don't make it kind of category. And it's not very deep. Just had two people. I'd lead with Josiah Dunham from Evansville Christian. Another fantastic career, been a big-time scorer for them forever, and leading a really good team. Evansville Christian has a great team down south this year, and he's been a major key to that. Mostly a scorer, but a good ball handler, defender, and another guy that kind of just does a little bit of everything. He's played at a high level for Indiana Elite over the summer, so he can fit into different styles, different systems, and I think he's a type that could very well make this team.
Yeah, he was on my list as well of that next tier. Their team has been, like you mentioned, playing really well. He's averaging about 21, 22 points a game. I had a chance to see him up here at the Sneakers for Santa event, and was really impressed with them. Thought he handled himself really. We didn't shoot the best in that game, but that's obviously something he does really well. And I mean, he's I think when you look sometimes 1A, the stats get skewed by who you're playing against. I think in his case, though, they're playing some of the best teams around in their area, especially. So I don't think it's misleading what he's been able to do for that team. And I think he would be a definitely one I'd have in that category as well of guys that, would probably slide in there. Probably, depends maybe if they're a team, maybe in that situation, they need to make a little bit of a run to solidify his case. But yeah, I think he's one that'll be right in the mix there. And who else did you have, Trevor?
I went Javon Lewis up at Fort Wayne, another team that's really improved throughout his career, and he was a big piece of it. I think he's scoring about 20 a game for them. And I just think his individual career has been really good, and then the team success that has followed him throughout his career as he continued to get better. I think those two things have really helped his case. Don't know if he will be on the good side of the cut here or not, but I would be surprised if he doesn't make it just through my eyes.
And I'll turn it over to our Fort Wayne expert.
Yeah, that was going to be the next name. If we give Trevor Tyler Parrish from Chesterton, I'll take a Fort Wayne guy. Javon Lewis has been the best player in the city the last 2 years. Wayne making it to semi-state last year, and they gave I believe Kokomo a little bit of difficulty in that semi-state game, obviously falling to the eventual state runner-ups. But they have most of their team back this year from last year's team. He's obviously the head of the snake at the point guard, super quick, not a great three-point shooter, but very streaky. I mean, he can hit 2 or 3 or 4 in a row real quickly, and that just opens up his driving lanes. He's so quick and so strong. I've yet to see somebody really keep themselves in front of him going to the basket. They have a lot of other talented players on their team: Preston Comer, H.J. Dillard, Chase Barnes, Caleb Williams-Thomas. It's one of the more talented starting fives in the northern half of the state in 4A. It wouldn't surprise me if they make a run to semi-state here this year, and Javon Lewis has been the main reason why. So he was on, as Trevor put it, surprised if he doesn't make it list for me.
And he's a guy that, they're 15-3. He's already got and this will be the case with another person I'm about to bring up here, but he's already got a sectional championship under his belt. He's got a regional championship under his belt. So and I think they're a very hungry team. I think they're a team that they really want to make and not that everybody doesn't, but they have the experience now that they've made a tournament run, and I think they're hungry to do it. They've come down here and played a couple times. They lost to Ben Davis, lost to Lawrence North. The Tech beat them. So the only teams they've lost to are these Indianapolis teams that are all really good. But they played Ben Davis for a half. They were ahead of them, and just really impressed with how hard they played. They didn't fall apart, but Ben Davis kind of took it to them a little bit in the second half of that game. But came away impressed with what they've got, and Lewis certainly a big part of that. And he's another guy. I think you make a tournament run, you put yourself in a good position, and they're certainly capable of doing that this year. They have all the pieces in place, and I think a good year for them to have this opportunity to do so. The next, I'm going to bring up Aaron Fine from Noblesville in this mix, because I think he's maybe a similar type case as Lewis, where he has a sectional title under his belt. And they also, Noblesville did have a Indian All-Star last year, and Luke Almodovar, who was a big part of that. Reason why, but Fine's a guy. He's got 1,000 points now. He's their leading scorer. He kind of took on more of a scoring role this year. Still the big assist guy for them, like he has been. But to me, he's one of these guys that goes into the sectional. He's got a lot under his belt already. He's not someone who hasn't won. That Noblesville team this year, I think, is maybe better than they were last year, and he's a big reason for that. So I would put him. Did you guys have him in your next category here?
I had him one step below, but go ahead, Shark.
Yeah, and he was a kid. I was wondering how he would carry. You talked about Luke Almodovar being an Indiana All-Star last year. How Aaron would carry having to be kind of a marked man every night and being that responsibility for the Millers, and he's passed that test with flying colors. He's somebody who I've been really impressed with how he's played this year. And like you said, Noblesville making it to semi-state last year, they could be even better this year. Obviously, that's a incredibly tough sectional, but as you said, they'll get to play it on their home floor. So if they can get out of that sectional, Aaron's probably going to be a big reason why, and I think that would only solidify his spot on this team.
Yeah, I think he needs to turn some heads in the sectional, maybe not even win it, but just have a really good sectional, win a game or two or be really, really great. I've been impressed with his play this year. Been that leader for Noblesville, and a guy that does a little bit of everything. He's scoring much better this year, but he's a big-time leader, tough kid, kind of a coach on the floor, if you will, obviously with his dad's coaching background. But I think he still needs to kind of play his way onto the team in my eyes.
He's a 17.5, 3.6 assists, and 3.5 rebounds. So pretty good numbers across the board. Obviously, you kind of assess these things, and it's like, does it help to have really good teammates, or does it, your overall numbers maybe sometimes go down, but your efficiency may go up? But Hunter Walston, Justin Curry, and those guys are obviously really good players as well. So he's got a good team around him. He's kind of that leader this year. So I kind of agree. I think he's probably going to maybe do a little bit more, but I think he's definitely in the mix in that next level. Trevor, so you only had two in your next level. What's your next? How'd you categorize your next group?
This was pretty much the up for grabs group, where I have a bunch of guys. It depends if you want to go a little bit bigger, more guards, if they play well in the state tournament. Kind of a mixed bag of players who could make it here. I'd probably go next on the list was Isaac Andrews from Wapahani. Great career, big-time scorer. I think his overall body of work, I think he should be in consideration, heavy consideration to make the team. Not sure if he's done quite enough. Might need a sectional or something here to really solidify himself, but have loved what he's done throughout his career, and I think just his resume should put him in that, heavy look to get on the team.
Yeah, I think you're right. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, Wapahani's been one of the best small school programs in the state now, and Isaac's been a 4-year starter, and he's put up some ridiculous numbers. He's, I believe, closing in on 2,000 career points. Might get that by the time sectionals roll around. or in sectionals, but they've been a consistent winning program there outside of Muncie, and he's been called upon to help carry that load from day one as a freshman. So definitely a deserving choice here. Shooting, I think 46% from three I saw on the year. So a kid who's also able to get to the basket. He's just a really tough cover, especially at the 2A level, and very, very deserving pick if he does make it.
Well, I'm going to throw this name out at you, Trevor, because you're the Chesterton guy, and there's another guy on Chesterton's team, I think, that's going to get some looks, Mr. Sims, out of for the Trojans. And it's kind of that weird situation where, does Chesterton have to win more because to get a second guy, or, you're going to need some size. He obviously has that. He's a 1,000-point scorer like his teammate Tyler Parrish. But, what do you think Justin Sims out of Chesterton?
Yeah, I put him in that kind of same category as Fine and Andrews. I think he needs to do a little bit more. We talked about Tyler Parrish, his teammate, earlier. He's had just an unbelievable senior year. Sims has been good for Chesterton. He's been that second guy for him, but not quite to the level of Parrish. So I think he still needs to do a little bit, probably win another sectional for Chesterton. And if they do that, get a few more eyeballs on him, I think he could definitely make the team.
Yeah, and this is a group that needs size. All the names we've listed, really the only front court players have been Flory and Keenan Gardner. So this is a team that's definitely going to need some size. Not saying Flory couldn't go all 40 in these games with his motor, but you definitely want to have some options in the front court, and I think you need a little bit of size there. Justin's a kid who can, long, wiry athlete, can play the four next to Flory, or can be kind of a smaller five, dive guy, dunker, that type of situation in all-star games. So definitely, he was a starter on that Chesterton State runner-up team as well, like you said. So he's been there, done that, and certainly a talented kid in his own right.
And you mentioned size, and I wanted to, now we're talking about possibly having two teammates on the same team. I think a similar situation, and there's another name I want to go back to here in a second because I think he's deserving of, being on this list as well that we're talking about. But also Westfield has two players that, one has size, one's a guard, one's been around longer, one's been only there for a year. This team may not get out of the sectional potentially. They certainly could. They're a very good team, Westfield, at only one loss on the season so far. As we record this, they're going into play Fishers tomorrow. But Trey Buchanan and Nick Book, that's quite a combination. Those guys have been putting up really good numbers this year. It's a very good defensive team. Nick Book only coming in for 1 year. Sometimes that, is, I don't want to say it's frowned upon, but, sometimes, the people who vote for this and the people who put the people on the team, there's a lot of coaches. So, you may not like it just having a 1 year guy coming in, but he didn't come from another school. He came from Oak Hill Academy, or not another in-state school, and he's a New Zealand native. So, I'm curious about him. I think he has a real good shot, honestly, to make this team because you need another guy who can get rebounds and do those things, and he can spot up, he can drive, he plays really hard. A lot to like about him. And then Trey Buchanan, who's kind of the leader of that team. So how do you guys assess those two making this team?
Kind of like you're saying, with Nick Book only being there 1 year and his stats really not popping off at you. I think there are a couple other bigs ahead of him in my eyes. But obviously, if you're looking for size, I think he's a great option. And Trey Buchanan, with his shooting ability, if you want to add another shooter to this team, would be a really good option. I think I have a handful of guys above them at this point, but if they're obviously a great team. They've been towards the top of 4A all season, and if they make a run here, I think you do get at least one of those guys on the team. But I think they do need more work, kind of add to their resume in order to make the team here.
Yeah, looking at their stat numbers, but their numbers in what they need, Westfield needs to do to win, and they've been, that HCC just seems like such a grind this year with Fishers, Noblesville, them. Obviously, Carmel's shown they can play with anybody. Same thing with Brownsburg. Just seems like such a crazy conference. Zionsville's got talent. To do what they're doing and winning night in, night out in that league, you obviously have to take notice of those two and what they've been able to accomplish. Like Trevor said, Nick only being there this year, that could hurt just from a name recognition standpoint with the people choosing that. But when Westfield made their run a couple years ago, Trey was their sixth man as a sophomore, knocked down some huge shots in the state tournament. And he's kind of continually, stepped his game up year by year into that true leader for them at the guard spot. So nice to see his progression. Like Trevor said, the numbers may not be there, but the impact they have on their team is definitely noticed.
Well, again, we're breaking down the Indiana All-Star team. If you want to go back and listen to assessment of the end of the Purdue game, you can find that somewhere in the timeline. I think he's watching Hawaii 5-0 reruns now or something, or
we're at Penn State Rutgers right now. Chris Collins did get tossed, and he went after Courtney Green on the floor. So be on the look for some replays because that's going to be all over. I guess we have to call it X right now. So you'll see those highlights, Kyle.
We can call it Twitter. It's no problem.
Well, whatever you want, Shark.
Whatever you want. All right. So next, I wanted to mention another name too, because I think not that we skipped over him, but Ron Rutland from Christmas Addicts, who, I think, his numbers have not been what they were last year, but partly that's just because his team changed. His role changed a bit. He honestly hadn't probably played or shot as well as he can. But I do think this Addicts team has a chance to go pretty far. Again, they talk about the Westfield sectional, the Noblesville with all them, Fishers, but that sectional 10 is a beast as well. But Addicts won the city. They've been on a pretty good run here. They tripped up against Ben Davis, who's really good also. But Ron Rutland may be a name I think to keep in mind as well, Trevor.
Yeah, especially if they do make a run like you're talking. If they can get deep in the tournament, vie for the state title in 4A, I think he's the type that can make the team. Like you're saying, I thought his numbers haven't been quite as good as they were last year. Mason Lewis coming in and kind of taking the ball out of his hands a little bit more. And he hasn't shot quite as well as he can. He catches fire in the state tournament and Addicts makes a run. I think he's got a very, very good chance of making the team if they can get deep in the tournament.
And part of the reason his numbers maybe haven't been as impressive as you would think is Desmond Briscoe's really taken a step forward for Addicts and commanded a lot of attention. He's such a matchup nightmare for people that, they use him in a lot of ways, the junior forward there at Addicts. So it's kind of you see who's got the favorable matchup, whether it's Ron or Desmond, and sometimes it's going to be Desmond with what he can do inside, and Ron's content, and Ron knows that's, what gives him the best chance to win. So he's more than happy to just distribute, handle the ball, shoot it, obviously at a high level. But he's certainly capable of going for 25 plus if you need him to as well.
Yeah, I think he's a name that people know. I think that'll help too, because he's already has a known name. He's got a lot under his belt. He's and I think sometimes too, it's unfair to like, oh, he's not averaging as much. He's not having as good of a season. I'm not just saying this about him, but just generally, situations change. His team is better. Their team is better. They're more equipped to make a tournament run right now than they were last year. And like you said, Shark, Briscoe's a better player. He's just flat out, they're trying to get the ball to him in clutch situations, and Rutland will as well. But, he's just not having to score as much this year. Now, I think he can do more, and I think he can play better than he has been. Not that he's playing poorly, but I think he can go out and have a 25, 30-point game in a big game and lead them. So we'll see with him. I think he's, to me, I kind of look at it and I'm like, man, Rutland seems like he'd be one of those 13 guys. And, when I look at the team, I just think he might be on there. So I just, wanted to mention him as well. Trevor, who was next up on your list?
Well, kind of in the same situation as Rutland, I went with Kobe Bowles at Lawrence North. He's been, a very good player throughout his career, not putting up huge numbers for LN, but they're so balanced there, and they're one of the top 4A teams. So if they make a run, I think he would have a good argument to be on the team, give you some more athleticism at the guard position. kind of do a few different things. Probably need something in the state tournament from LN to get him on the team. Probably get out of that really difficult sectional and, probably just semi-state or further for him to make it. But I thought he was kind of in that same situation as Rutland, where his numbers aren't huge, but his impact and playing for a winning team give him a good resume to be on the team.
Well, and here's the deal. I mean, if they're undefeated at the end of the season, or if they're state champions with 1 or 2 losses, who else is going to be on Lawrence North? It's one of those things where he's really the only guy you would take. They have Baker is also a senior, but he's not going to have the overall numbers. Kobe will have, his numbers aren't bad. He's 12.3 points, 3 assists, but a couple steals, about 3 or 4 rebounds. So, he has pretty good numbers. I mean, not the level of like Xavier Robinson, but I can't imagine if they win state or they're undefeated or, whatever. And I think they're probably the favorite to win state, or one of them, one of a handful, or maybe 2 or 3. I think they're the best team in my opinion. So I don't know. I mean, that, it would be weird if they win state and there's no LN guys on the team.
Yeah, that's kind of my thinking there. Like, they definitely do need to do something in the state tournament for him to get on the team. But if they win state, I think you have to put him on there. He's going to be a big reason why they do win state if it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Shark, who else who are we missing from the Fort Wayne area to talk about?
Kyle, we're not missing anybody from the Fort Wayne area right now.
Not at this level.
Not at this level. There's some other kids who are having really good years. Caleb Lehrman at Dwenger's having a really good year, but they're struggling. Cole Hayworth, who's going to Grace at Concordia, they're having a good year. Jackson Pardon at Carroll is having a good year, but I know Carroll's kind of struggling, so not much. But you were talking about Trey Buchanan. If the team needed a shooter, I want to throw out another shooter for you. Joey Smith's at Center Grove.
Yeah.
Looking at his stats on Max Preps here, before we went on tonight, 17.5 points, 57% from the field, 57% from 3, on about 6 attempts a game. He's a guy who could come in and change the course of one of these Indiana-Kentucky games by coming in off the bench perhaps and knocking down 3 threes in a row and getting Indiana going on a run. So I think, talking about Kobe Bulls, Center Grove's probably going to have to make a run in the state tournament. For Joey to have a shot, he's going to have to put up some numbers in some big games in March. But as an option of a kid who can really step in and knock down shots, I think he's definitely warranted of a look.
Yeah, I agree on that. I'm always a big fan of his, and I think people kind of sleep on him sometimes, and then you look at his numbers and it's like, man, he's always efficient. I think he's just a better player than people realize. And that also is a team, that area of the state where will be coming from is sort of open, so they could definitely be a team that's playing pretty deep into March, and he'll be a major part of that if they are. So I agree with you on Schmitz. Jackson Pardon, I don't know what his numbers are exactly. He's a guy, though. He's Division I. He's Bowling Green. He was the one I thought you might bring up. But then, like you mentioned, Shark, they're only 6-11. So I don't know if that's it's hard to put a guy on the team who's has a losing record. I would think. Yeah,
unless they're just going for crazy numbers, and they have a pretty balanced team there with Cannon Hauser and Jair Simpson, and like you said, if you're not putting up wins, you have to be doing this on a good team to show that you're able to be a quality talent that leads their team. And Carroll just not having as successful a season, I think, as they would have hoped to start this year.
Trevor, who's next on your list there?
There are actually 2 guys that are kind of higher on my list than a lot of guys we've talked about. Especially in team makeup situations, 2 bigger guys. Malachi McNair down at Evansville Harrison, great back to the basket player. I think he's averaging like 16 and 10, somewhere in that range. So double, great hands, great touch in the inside. not the tallest or most athletic players, but he would give you some more size, some more length, and you could play through him at the post. I think Harrison's having a really good year, mainly because of him. So I thought he should be pretty high up there, especially if you're looking for another big to add to Flory and Gardner in this on this team.
And I'll say I completely agree. To me, I think and every time I talk to somebody about All-Stars, I bring his name up. I saw him at the Paul Logan invite there in North Central over the holidays. Was really impressed, and in a year where you're looking for guys and looking for some size and things like that. I mean, I thought he was really good. They lost that game, but they haven't lost very many this year, so I think that works in his favor. Again, being from that area of the state, maybe you're looking for another guy from there. That doesn't always mean anything necessarily, but maybe can't hurt in his case. And his numbers are 19 and 11. I mean, it's not like he's he's producing, so I'm a big fan of Malachi McNair, being in the mix. And, people ask me, I'll say he is very deserving of a long look to make the team. Maybe he's a guy that, does well at the top 60 or so and does well in that sort of situation. So you just never know. But I completely agree on him, Trevor. Who else did you have on that? You said you had one more there?
Yeah, I had another big Carson Rogers from Kokomo. I thought he's had a great year playing alongside Flory. Kind of went from, I think, 6-man last year for him, first big off the bench or fifth starter, kind of in that range for him. But this year, fantastic consistency, scoring inside for him, giving Kokomo even more options inside. Great rebounder. His game has really taken the next step. Obviously, his career numbers aren't huge, but I thought the way he's played this year, if you're looking for another big to add to the team, I thought he would be a really good option as well.
He's a guy that just occurred to me yesterday as I was going through this list. I'm like, you know what? I think maybe, in this year, if Kokomo does something, and his numbers have been really good. He keeps putting up good numbers. So I agree. He should be in the mix. And again, these big guys, sometimes there's always going to be a guy that you don't think about, or like, oh, well, they need another big to fill out the spot or whatever. So anybody who's like 6'6" to 6'8", I mean, you're going to have a better chance to make the team, because so many guys we talked about are guards. It's just that's the nature of it. So you're going to need some size, even if their numbers aren't great. Sometimes you're going to need another guy with size. So I'm going to throw another name out in a second here. Did you have another one, or was that it in that category?
That was basically it. I have a couple more lower on the list, but those two were the ones that I really wanted to mention because I think they would be good options for making the team.
Well, and this might be a little bit outside the box, but Braden Walters from Terre Haute North is a name I think maybe he's not a big scorer necessarily, but and he's his first year at Terre Haute North. He came from Linton Stockton, was a big part of that group, Macon State last year, and then has gone to Terre Haute North and had a good season. And he's 11.2 points, but then 5.8 rebounds, 3.6 assists. He's almost a guy who doesn't look to score a ton, but does a lot of good things on the court. And plays great defense, so he's sort of like a glue guy type of guy, but he's playing 4A basketball, and it's a team that's 15-3, and they're going to have a tough, it's a tough sectional with Plainfield, Brownsburg, Avon in there, Terre Haute South in there, so no guarantees. But when you start going down the list on this team, he's a name I thought maybe outside the box type of thinking a little bit, but a guy who may, I know you guys have seen him play, but maybe a guy that, his points may not jump out at you, but if you see him in a team setting, he does a lot.
Yeah, I really like his game. I do wish he would look to score more because he's athletic enough and skilled enough to score. He's always liked to be the distributor, the rebounder, the glue guy, like you're saying. I think he has the skills to score more, and he just is not aggressive enough. If he was scoring more, I think his numbers pop out more, and he would be kind of on that really top line of making the team. But like you said, really does a little bit of everything. Good athlete, good size. Definitely a guy, if you're looking to win games, you could add to this team.
All right. Who else are we missing here? Who's I know there are some other names out there. Obviously, we haven't mentioned yet, and of course, you could go down pretty far. And there's some guys I think that that deserve mention. But who else did you guys have?
Go ahead, Shark, if you haven't.
Trevor, I'm going to hop up to the region and
Better not steal my guys.
Jake Smith at Lake
Oh,
Central.
man, that was one of them.
You took my Malachi McNair. I was going to try and squeeze that one in on you. So Lake Central 14-2 this year. Started out 14-0. Lost their last two to Portage and Chesterton. I'm sorry, 13-2. But Jake's kind of an inside-outside, 6'5", 6'6", 4-man who can do a lot of different things. Probably doesn't impress you the most when he's walking off the bus, but comes in and can score in some different ways for him and leading a really good Lake Central team. Looking at somebody with some size, some positional versatility there. I know he's having a great year, so that was a name I wanted to throw out.
Yeah, that was one of them. I had another region guy, Caleb Parks over at Bishop Knoll. Started the season just unbelievably, just putting up huge numbers. Kind of regressed a little bit, but I think he's still in that 16 or 17 points per game range for him. Really good athlete. He's come on during his senior year. Really is making that Knoll team go. Really athletic, thrives in transition, but can make some shots too. Think he would definitely need to make some noise in the state tournament to get on the team, but just wanted to point him out since he's having such a good senior year.
Well, I'll throw another one out there. Terry Howell from Evansville Bossy, who was on the junior all-star team last year. And that's not a team that, they've had some trouble this year. I know they've had some guys out at times, but I think he's a name that have some name recognition. He's going to end up putting pretty good numbers up. He's already over 1,000 points for his career, pretty far over 1,000 actually. So I would say he's, again, talking guards again. So he's another smaller guard. So you start running out of guard spots at some point, but I think he's a name that could be in that mix as well. And then, it's again, there's a lot of different, things you could look at when you're putting together a team, but, Josiah Gustin's another guy with some size. He's committed to Marion at Pendleton Heights and has had a pretty good year. I got a chance to see him against Greenfield Central the other night and thought he looked pretty good out there. He's put on some muscle, better overall player, than he has been. And I think he's got a pretty bright future ahead of him too. But, he's another guy I think maybe potentially could be in that, on that bubble category.
Yeah. If you want to throw out another guy with some size, Mason Harvey over at Seton Catholic, about 6'7", shoots it really well from three actually too. He's had a great career for him, and I think he's scoring over 20 points. I think maybe 23 points a game for him. Has had a really good career. Another guy with some size and some skill that you could look to add to the team.
Jeff, you got anybody else here?
We've pretty much covered all the guys I had on my list. Like you were saying, Kyle, just trying to find some size to back up Flory and Keenan Gardner, I think is going to be the biggest kind of question mark, and who can really take hold of the last month of the regular season and state tournament time. Anybody who's 6'6" or bigger that can prove that they can play a little bit, I think is going to draw some consideration for this team just because of the roster makeup and what this class has. There's going to be some really talented guards that are getting left off of this team. That's just going to happen with how deep the guard class is and how many people are in that group that's trying to play their way on. But if you're a big, I think there's spots available for you on this team. They're going to need size behind Flory.
Well, another name too, I'll say Grant Porath from Brownsburg, 14.9, does a lot of things, left-handed, uses body really well, rebounds well. Again, that team, they'll be in a tough sectional with Plainfield and Avon and Terre Haute North, like I mentioned, but had a really good career, been a guy who's been playing for 3 years now. And, still up in the air on where he's going, but another career type guy. And maybe if they end up making a run, could have some opportunity. But yeah, we're getting to the point pretty far. We've talked about a lot of names. I don't even know how many names we've mentioned, but it's always like I mentioned earlier. It's just you're putting together a team, not necessarily just a list of names. So that can always make it difficult. And I think that's kind of the thing with this team is, do you want another guard? Do you want some size? How do you kind of mix and match? Do you feel like having Flory out there is enough, enough, and just put some shooting around him, So it's and that'll come down to the coaches too. So how this works basically is the tournament the All-Star director, Mike Broughton, will basically pick most of the team, and then they'll leave some spots open for the coach to decide on some names too. So that'll have a factor, what does the coach want? What else do you need, coach, type of thing. So, that could also be a part of this process as well. It will be for sure. So that's putting the team together is a little more complicated than maybe people think it is.
Yeah, I say they play 5 out, just go all guards and fire up shots and see how it goes. I think that would work out well. So.
Yeah, there's a competitiveness to this game. I think, I remember that, going down to Kentucky, especially that first night, and like last year they got beat, and it's like, we're not doing what we thought we were going to do coming down here. And so there is a level of competitiveness to it as well. And usually it works out pretty well in Indiana's side, but it's a big deal. I mean, being an Indiana All-Star, you walk in these gyms and the jerseys are on the wall, and I think it still resonates for sure. It's a goal of these kids. And, I don't take that lightly as we talk about this, knowing, this is kind of what you play for beyond the team stuff. It kind of puts you in a different stratosphere to some level. So it's a big deal, even in a year where it's sort of, maybe not as deep. We could talk for 3 hours on next year's team probably and not run out of things to talk about, which it's pretty incredible, the depth of that class, and who knows how it shakes out. But this year's team, I think, is a little bit, a little bit light, I would say. And next year will be the opposite. How do you, just as we get done here, Trevor, how do you kind of assess next year?
Oh, it's one of the best classes we've seen in a long time. I think it kind of compares pretty well to like 2014, 2012, those really deep classes plus high-end talent. So you have big time guys up at top, but then it goes on for, 30 or 40 players that are either have D1 scholarships or will get them soon throughout the state. So just the depth is incredible, but you do have that high-end talent with, Trent Sisley, Braylon Mullins, Xavier Robinson, Desmond Briscoe. It just keeps going and going. So it will be a fun class as long as they do stay in state.
Yeah, there's so many guys. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, there's been a bunch of guys who have really taken a huge jump in their junior years in that class that I think at the start of the year, we're like, oh, okay, Trent Sisley, with Jalen Harrelson leaving. Trent Sisley's the headliner, but I know, Kyle, you got a chance to see Braylon Mullins drop, 50 or 51 on Pendleton Heights. Trevor, up in your neck of the woods, Jack Smiley's having just a ridiculous season for Valparaiso up there. Their left-handed guard, he's putting up video game numbers half the time. And there's other really good players. I got a chance to see Kellen Pickett at Blackhawk Christian a couple weeks ago. He's now the man there on a really good team. Taking more of a leadership role. He was, I thought, the best player in the 2A state final game last year. So he's in that class. And like Trevor said, you just go down the line. There's so many kids that you look at for, picking the junior all-stars, even with the breakup of how they break up the teams, that's going to be hard. And there's going to be some really good kids left off the junior all-stars this year.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Going back to Mullins' game there, Kyle, did they make sure that was 51? Because that final shot you said was then called a 2, but it was clearly a 3. Did they make sure that was 51?
So yeah, I'm driving home. So no one originally the ref threw up his hands. They called it a 3. It was 74-72. And then all of a sudden they changed it to 73-72 and made it a 2-pointer. So we're in the locker room talking to Mullins like, man, that's too bad you stepped on the line, blah, 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 he's like, man, yeah, it's like, I'll have to break it some other time, whatever, just kind of like, oh, well, but it was 50. But so then it would come back out, and I talked to Luke Meredith, and actually talked to the referee, and he's like, I don't know where they changed it to 2 or why they did. It should be a 3 because we left the court, said it was a 3. So that's how it went in the record books, was at 74-72, 51 points, broke the record. And the video shows it was the right call. He was behind the line. So he's deserving of that 51 in the record. Yeah. I think the reason they changed it to 2 was because he kind of ended up falling forward as he shot it, and it looked like he was inside the line at that. And they probably just looked up and saw him as he was falling forward, and I'm assuming that's why they changed it. So no, it wouldn't have been a huge deal at all if it wouldn't have been 51. So yeah. No one would have cared if it was called it wrongly a 2 because they won anyway. But yeah, it turned out to be 51. It was credible. 41 in the second half and the 2 overtimes. I mean, just insane game. And Pendleton Heights played really well. They probably should have won a couple different times. But yeah, I mean, I go down this, and then I saw Josiah Ball from Mechaniqua. Obviously, he's not on the Mullins level, but again, it's like another junior who's just like really a unique player. Probably better than people realize he is. Just like all these guys are juniors, it seems like. So every game I go to, I'm like, that's like Julius Gizzi last week, dropping 36 on LN, like another junior. It's like, man, all these guys seem like they're all in that same class.
Yeah, this class is just loaded. It's fun because they keep improving too. Mm-hmm. Obviously a lot of times people or players get reputations early in their career and don't quite live up to it. But this class just seems to get better and better with every week or two. Somebody else is popping up.
Yeah, and Kyle, you were talking about somebody at Mechaniqua, not exactly a hotbed of basketball talent. I think it's really cool to see the dispersion of the different schools. You come back into the greater Fort Wayne area. I know Trey Yoder at Woodlands having a really good junior year. Gavin Benton at Manchester is, I think, like 23-12, and he's produced at a high level from his first game as a freshman. Just really cool to see kids from all over the state, and maybe at places that don't traditionally have, this level of basketball talent being talked about for, spots on junior all-star teams. And like Trevor said, there's so much depth in this class. You're going to get that. It's going to be really interesting to see these kids who have made a jump in their junior years now who makes a jump to their senior year for next year's team as well.
Yeah, it's one of those years. I always look forward to years like that because you kind of know what these teams, like going into this year, there's a lot of, you just didn't know what these teams would look like exactly. Going into next year, we're going to know a lot, like, oh, this team, we lose people like Flory and Kokomo obviously will look a lot different. But, man, I mean, it's just like, Cathedral, look how good they're going to be, with Brady Kaler. And, it's just like, it's just all kinds of stuff to look forward to for next year. I'm already excited for next year, and we haven't even finished this year. So, but yeah,
it's on the calendar.
Yeah, it's a it's a great class. So, but yeah, we could do a whole nother episode on that. But I know Shark's got to watch Colombo and get on with his night. So, but appreciate you guys doing it. Anything else? Anybody else we missed? I don't know if there's anybody I'm sure there is. There are more people we could mention, but anybody else we missed?
I don't have any glaring omissions right now. Obviously, like you said, there's a bunch that could be named, but it will take a lot for them to get on the team from here on out. But definitely be interesting to see how the rest of the season and the state tournament plays out to see who does get on this team.
And it'll be interesting to see if anybody kind of plays their way on via the top 60 workout. That's happened in the past where guys have had really impressive workouts there and maybe, going in, we're not on the team and kind of played their way on via that workout. So that'll be interesting to see as well. And there could be 2 or 3 guys in that workout that play their way on.
That's the Eugene German route to the team. That's and he definitely deserved it. But yeah, you could see a guy like there's players like Jordan Lomax or Mason Lewis, guys like that who would play well and have had. Those are guys who are also transfers, though. And we maybe, sometimes those guys maybe have a harder time, but in a top 60 type thing, they may pop off and play really well. And then it's like, okay, in a year where there's that opening, I mean, that could decide something. So anyway, but I appreciate you guys doing this, and we'll see how it shakes out. About a month left of the season, and then we'll get into sectional play, and teams will start falling off, and others will move forward, and it'll sometimes create some more questions, or sometimes create some some more easier to pick. So, but thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.